Good morning, everyone, colleagues in public service communications, and thank you for coming, and thank you to Florence for introducing me. My job this morning is to make you more intelligent and wealthier, to get you better jobs and to get you paid more money because you'll be in better jobs, because I provide you with some communication theory and practice, what I'm going to characterise as the science of communications, which I think will enable you to do your jobs better. Do we have any people, colleagues from Germany in the room? Yes, good. One, just one. One German, two Germans, three Germans at least. Good. 4, 5. I'm a great fan of Germany as an Arsenal fan. We have at least two great German football players, and we beat Bayern Munich, which is sad, I know, but anyway, it's down to our German contingent. Do we have any Italians and Spaniards in the room? Ladies, gentlemen, you're going to find this difficult. UK government communications is Germanic. It is like German engineering and BMWs and autobahns. We're not into all that creative, lovely cultural stuff that is so beautifully presented and represents the heritage, history and present of countries, great countries like Italy and Spanish. And the application of science in the way that BMW engineers cars is part of what this presentation is about. I've summarised on the screen, I hope you can all see, in a tweet what I want to get across to you today. And I'm going to talk in more detail about. Some of you, and perhaps even the translator, will think that oasis is a place in a desert where you find water. Perhaps that's a good metaphor for it. Oasis, in this case, stands for the core of how the UK government does communications, which means setting for the O, in English, a very clear objective. For the A, considering who the audience are. For the S, thinking through the strategy. I is implementation. And S is for scoring or evaluation. So OASIS is the way we practice communications, right up to the interactions we have with the Prime Minister and across all our activities. All UK government communications is part of a campaign. Any internal communications interaction, any media relations initiative is part of a campaign to deliver a goal. Sometimes about public information, more often about understanding, and usually about changing behaviour for the better. I'm going to talk to you about digital listening, unity and nudges, or perhaps put more formally, social marketing. So, partly why there is some euros and a brain on that screen is that this doesn't require millions and millions of euros, but it does require the application of the grey matter inside your heads. You can all do this. You can run brilliant campaigns. Florence was kind enough to refer to the campaigns that the UK government does. We've been doing it for a long time, perhaps over, well, at least over 150 years. Today in London, my colleagues launched a 9-foot purple teddy bear with sticky out ears and big eyes in Piccadilly Circus. You don't seem very curious about that. Does anyone want to ask me why? Because we need people in the UK to get pensions, to have security in their old age. And people like us don't do this. They ignore pensions, and partly Wookiee, which is the big creature, is designed to say you can't avoid the pensions like you can't avoid this big cuddly toy. I hope that illustrates our approach. Some of you believe me, some of you think I'm completely mad. Let's test this. I think this conference is hugely important. I'm grateful for Tom and everyone in Brussels for the organisation and effort they put into it. But this conference is about you. What I want to get across to communicators, the approach we should take as communicators, I say it's about A, B, C. Communications is always about the audience, and you are my audience. It should demonstrate brevity. All of you are guilty of doing communications that is too long and boring. It's true, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. 3, communications should be a conversation. So just to test this and to test what we're going to talk about over the next hour, I want to pass over to you for a few minutes. And I want you to introduce yourself to the person on your left, if you like the look of the person on your left. If you don't like the look of your person on your left, talk to the person on your right. Don't talk to your friend, introduce yourself to a new person. The way to break the ice is tell them a fact about you that's a bit wacky and different. You know, I used to be a meat trader on Smithfield Meat Market. I also have chopped the head off a chicken in public. I could tell you about that if you're interested. But just tell them a fact that you don't know. Make a new friend. Who knows? It might last for life. And then think of a question about new trends in government campaigning or an area of discussion you would like me to focus on. Now, the difficult thing with this exercise is I'm just going to pick a number. I particularly like number 198, for example, so I'm just going to call over to you and say, all right, what were you discussing numbers 53, 52 and 54 or so on? You've only got a minute or so to do this, perhaps 2 minutes. So have a discussion and let's pick out some areas that we think we ought to focus on, because you are my audience and I'd rather leave you today better and more qualified to do your jobs than me just talk at you for 40 minutes. Over to you. Yeah. 30 seconds to go. Fifteen seconds. 5 seconds. All right, can we have some order, please? Can we have some order? Order. Order. It's not supposed to be fun over at 171. Right, let's quieten it down. All right, Florence, who shall we turn to?
We're going to try and span the room, so
yeah.
Let's start to the left, number 132. That's you, yes.
Yeah. Just tell us who you are, because we'd like to know.
Sure. So my name is Pamela Bartar. I'm representing the Center for Social Innovation based in Vienna. We are an institute in the field of SSH, Social Sciences and Humanities. And I just met, can I go on? I just met Anna to my right, and I was asking her why she was participating or why she participates in this conference. And she told me that she's looking forward to best practice and other cases of other partners. And well, actually it's the very same with me. So I'm also interested in evaluation, like the session before. And well, we didn't get further because there was not so much time left, but I'm sure that there would be many interesting questions and answers to follow.
Number 118. Okay, well, from here it looks like it's you. That's why, so it will be you.
118 is a space between the two of us, so we were... My name's Mark Jeffrey. I'm from the Barcelona representation of the European Commission. And I was talking to Antonis, who's the head of unit, no, of DG, one of DG Com's units on outreach. So we were talking about different things we have in common. In fact, we're talking about the reform of different the European Commission's networks of communication. So there's lots of things to talk about. So we were mentioning all of that.
One to the right, 108.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Marta Wsoczyńska. I work for one of the European Commission agencies for asthma. And I was speaking to Nadia, which is on my left. As for kind of professional talk, we had it just before the start of the workshop. So yeah, because we do work in the same agencies, so we quickly exchange on what exactly we are doing there and so on. And now when we're supposed to find something interesting about ourselves, we're much more focused on something from private life and so on. So so yeah.
I'm sure everyone would like to hear some things from your private life. Is it a good story?
No, but that was because we were just desperately looking for something really interesting, like pronunciation of a Polish name and some stories with a dog from childhood, basically.
Thank you. If there are other conversations that were had and you want to raise issues, there'll be obviously time for that at the end. Partly I was doing that to illustrate that communication should be a conversation. If you feel your faces, can you feel your faces? You can do it. It's fine. You can do it. You have 2 ears. Everyone have 2 ears? No? Right? 2 ears. And we have 1 mouth. And we should communicate in that proportion. We should listen twice as much as we speak. And that is another failing that we're all, including me, guilty of. So I'm trying to illustrate through that exercise 2 things. 1, the importance of conversation in campaign communications. 2nd, the importance of the emotional link. The fact that you have a link with people because of the football team you support, the friends you have, the common interests you have as a group of agencies or as members of the European Commission is all part of what I want to get across to you today. I warn you there are some interesting bits to this presentation and there's some very dull bits. You can decide which is which. Actually, I'd rather not have done this speech here at all. I would rather, if I had a flying carpet, have done this speech in a place called Oldham. Oldham is outside Manchester. Manchester is in the north of England. Oldham is a rough, tough town with a big migrant population, declining industry. It's quite poor, but it also has strong political leadership, determination, and improving public services. And it does concern me as communicators that we spend lots of time in our offices and places like this. And one of the things I would like you to do, wherever you go back to Vienna or Warsaw or here in Brussels, take your teams out onto the streets. There might be towns that are not quite as tough and demanding as Oldham, where we took the communications team out onto the street and we gave them a clipboard with 10 questions about what do you think of public services here? How would you improve them? What do you find about the standard of communication? And you get communicators to do this work and meet real citizens. And 2 things happen. First, they're quite scared. They've got to talk to real people rather than doing it through the prism of social media or via press releases. And second, having come face to face with real people and asked them questions, they gain insight into what real people actually feel when public service, when government communicates with them, and as a result, they do better communications. So sessions like this are great, but they're they are a second choice as compared to going out and meeting the audience. All right, let's talk about the biggest campaign that I have been involved with over the past year. This was the campaign to keep Scotland in the United Kingdom. This was a campaign which was ultimately successful. 55% of Scots voted to remain in the United Kingdom. And the two images on the screen I've used to illustrate both the rational and emotional sides you need to any campaign to win people's permission. A campaign is an attempt to influence people with facts and emotion to win their permission. And we did lots of policy work around facts about the dangers of Scotland separating from the Union, and we made the case about how the United Kingdom provides strong pensions, public services, passports, and the pound as the currency. But I just wanted to illustrate, and that's why the creature. Does anyone know what the creature on the screen is? Cow, yeah, it's a Highland cow. Highland cow. Now, you will all have the equivalent of a Highland cow, because one of the things we noticed is this was a highly digital campaign. Lots of the people who were unsure about where they were going to, how they were going to vote, were not necessarily newspaper readers or consumers of broadcast, broadcast news. They were on Facebook. They were on social media, but predominantly on Facebook. And to reach them with content, thank you, Florence, to reach them with content that they would actually engage with and use, we couldn't just say, the UK government is a good thing, please read this. We had to bring them in. One of the ways we did that, often we used it by using people who looked like them and were them and could put the case directly to them, and I'll come back to that. But one of the tricks we used to illustrate the importance of reaching the audience with content that they want to use in an emotional way is we found that if we put out tweets or blogs or posts that said this is the UK government with the Union flag on, typically we'd get a 0.1% engagement rate, 0.1%. When we put Highland Cow on the tweet, the blog or the post, we got a 10% engagement rate because people like Highland cows. Now, in Austria it might be dogs, in Germany it might be cats, in Holland, heaven knows. But nevertheless, this is a simple example about trying to think through what the audience wants rather than just doing things in a traditional manner. I think communications is a hugely powerful tool. I hope no one will leave this session and go away thinking, right, I can now write the best press release or design the best Facebook post. I want you to be better public servants. I do my job because I believe that the power of communications is to improve, enrich and save lives through brilliant public service communications. And that is important because I also want to empower you to say to whoever you work for, don't tell me as a communications professional how many press releases or how many tweets I should publish. Tell me the objective you want from public service communications, how we can improve people's lives. And I will explain to you the route we best do that through the application of my professional communication knowledge. You can see on that screen some campaigning principles, and you can see a picture of a European dinner table, because I think that reinforces my point about all communications is now a conversation. Let's talk about a campaign in our practice. I've picked this campaign because I think that road safety is an issue in all European states, and therefore picking the Think campaign, which is the campaign to get people to drive more safely and use the roads more safely, I hope translates across countries and languages. This campaign has an immediate call to action. Think. Think whether you're a motorcyclist, think whether you're a pedestrian, think whether you're a car owner. It puts people and human stories to the front of the campaign. You can probably just make out the man standing underneath a glass. It's a pint glass, a beer glass. And that was a real car driver who drank too much, tried to drive home and caused an accident. And we spoke to him, we said, look, you know, you've got a prison sentence, you've lost your driving licence, but if you're going to help make amends to society, then you're going to be one of the faces of this campaign, and you're going to stand and you'll be photographed by the media and you're going to tell your story. And that story has far more cut through than many of the things we do. The girl who is a model, it's not a real person, who is dead on the road, is part of our message to school children about the dangers of crossing the roads without looking and without thinking. So I hope this campaign has both emotional impact and immediate call to action. I hope you can see it generates a conversation in the way that this material can be used. You can see a lot of this stuff online, and we do parts of this campaign that show motorcyclists the dangers of going around corners too quickly. And the whole brand of the campaign is dark and slightly intimidating because it should send a big emotional sign, warning, you know, driving like this causes immense damage. The cost of a road fatality in the UK is about £30 million. I guess that's about 40 million euros. So every one of these we prevent saves the UK economy 40 million euros. And that is part of the evaluation we do. We do evaluation in terms of awareness and reach of the campaign, but also the hard return on investment. If we spend 10 million euros on this campaign and we save one life, that's a 4-to-1 return. I can talk about that in more detail if you would like. All right, you're all looking slightly bored now because we've been talking about communications. Let's talk. Has anyone seen the film 300? Did you like it? Yeah, it was this bit was inspired by that. Those of you who know your ancient European history, and of course you'll all know your ancient European history, thank God for Greece, because the Greeks managed to stop the Persians at the battles of Marathon and Salamis about 2,450 years ago last month. And the importance of that to Western civilization is the defeat of the Persians allowed the flourishing of Greek civilization, which is still the foundation for much of what we do and think today. And if the Persians had won, they would have imposed a sort of a Persian ancient equivalent of spin doctoring and dark arts and mysticism, and a lack of the rationality that Greek civilization brought through many people, including this man. Any clues? Aristotle, thank you. Aristotle set out the principles of communication 2,000 years ago. He summarised it, and this was particularly in terms of presenting a case as ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos in terms of the speaker's authority and credibility. Logos, the logic used to support a claim, induction and deduction, facts and statistics. And pathos, the emotional and motivational appeal, the use of language and emotional language. Ethos, logos and pathos. And those three things should still be central to the tone of our campaigns. And I think we have a fair amount of ethos, of credibility as public services. It's diminished in a world where a network, social challenge, digital world, but it's still there. We use quite a lot of logos, quite a lot of logic, but so often we lose the pathos, the importance of the emotional appeal, because we do great work in public service, in government, to save and improve lives, but that gets lost. So, thinking about that, I thought about communications as a definition of communications. I provided you with a standard definition of campaigns, but I want to talk a bit more about communication science, how we move from a sort of creative, accidental, anything can work approach into a far more systematic approach. Did anyone study chemistry at school? We've got some chemists, yeah, chemists. Some very bright people in the middle who stick their hands up at every opportunity. Clearly, the brains in the room. So the chemists will recognise the periodic table. Yeah, I'm gonna quiz you on this later, so you've got to remember it. All right. The origins of the periodic table were a man called John Newland from the UK, who came up with a version of the periodic table you can see on your screens, and then a Russian called Menledev, who actually codified it and came up with a better periodic table. And my point in telling you that story is that communication science is always developing. We've not reached the most perfect point, because we know communications is changing so rapidly. So for this session, I've decided to do a communications science table. In case you are interested in it, I've brought a hard copy, which, if you want to take one, and hand it round, it might guide you in your communications journey. Now, what I would suggest we do with this is just pause as it comes round. You can see it on the screen. If you talk to the person on your left, perhaps you now want to talk to the person on your right or the person behind you. I don't mind if you want to stand up and just stretch your legs for a moment. But just read the periodic table for communication science. This should be a tool that you put on your wall in the office. And when someone says, how do we address this challenge? You can say, well, actually, if we look at the strategic elements, in yellow, OASIS, and our priorities and how we want to change behaviour, we do that. Our campaigning tools, direct, online, regional. The key trends we have to consider about the emotional appeal, the brand purpose, and so on. What we want to set out as our goals, and so on. So I want to test this with you because I might be Newland, I might have developed something that's sort of partly useful but not there yet. I might be Mendeleev, Dev, I might be nearly right. I know I'm not totally right in this as in many other things. But I want you to think about it and think about whether this is useful as a tool to think about how you approach communication issues, how you would add to it and how you would subtract from it. On the back of the sheet is the next slide, which is OASIS and how we actually apply communication science to campaign delivery. So have those on the far left, not perhaps in politics, but in as I look, have we got a copy of the table? We got it on the screen anyway. Have a chat about it. Let me know whether you think it's useful or not.
Objectives, then you just look at the first line, and then you go down.
They're online. Like that.
The starter one is a direct outside of the story. How are you going to go about? What are you going to do? How are you going to analyze the
Okay, let's come to together. Any views on the application of that table? Yes. Just tell us who you are. Press the microphone and then tell us who you are.
I'm Patrick. I work for Flemish government.
Yeah.
I'm trying to educate my peers.
Yeah.
I think the content is interesting, but the presentation is, as my friend Eric said, as difficult as the original table. Secondly, I tried to look it up on the internet and it's not on there. Yes. Ah. Okay.
It's because it's new. It's partly done for this conference. I'm trying to think of something, provide you with some shareable content. But you might be right. The presentation might be terrible. Belgium might do a better one. Right at the back.
Hello, Christian Nielsen from ESN. It's a communications agency. I think it's great.
Thank you.
In the Performance Hub section, I see a little gap there, which you could quite easily put in something like saturation.
Yeah.
At what point is the return on investment no longer valid?
Yeah.
For example, with your Think campaign.
Yeah.
With shock communications, at some point you can go you know, that was still tame. You can probably hear from my accent, I'm from Australia, and we
Yeah.
ran a series of campaigns which were quite a lot more shocking, which worked for a while, but I think they reached a saturation point.
You're exactly right, they do. Shock and awe only works the point. Thank you. Good points. Did I see another hand? Yeah, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, another Australian. I love this. I'm a scientist turned science journalist, so I'm always going to like this. But the periodic table is about the same properties being shared across a column. Is there any logic to that, or is it just a nice way of arranging a set of boxes on the page?
We will develop this. I mean, we thought through it. We've done it a bit quick and dirty, which also tells you something about our approach. We will try things and develop them. We have got more things wrong in UK government communications than you could ever get wrong over the years. So we'll try things, we'll develop things. If they don't work, we'll iterate and design again. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, please. It's the one with it's got. Yeah.
No, it's just about the columns and rows, yeah?
Yeah.
Like Mendeleev did, yeah? So
Yeah.
I was understanding that the rows are fine, yeah? But the columns, so the same as previous predecessors.
Yeah. I think that you should be able to look at this table, and you can develop it, as some colleagues have said, in a way that picks out the relevant elements and then says, these are the things we have to do. OASIS should be the heart of any campaign. The 4 I's, insight, implementation, ideas and impact, are actually the 4 competencies we ask of government communicators. You've got to have insight into your campaigns, you've got to have creative ideas, you've got to be able to demonstrate impact, and then implementation is part of it. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's very interesting. My name is Antonis Papakos. I'm working in the European Commission.
Yeah.
Just a question, how you combine this table with the 3 elements as logos, pathos, and ethos?
Yeah.
Because you have started saying this is the basis of communication, how these 3 basic elements is combined with this table.
Yeah, okay, good question. Right, we'll hold other questions till the end, because Florence is warning me I've got to get on, otherwise I'm going to get thrown out. Right, so to answer that point, this should be the whole communications world. When we've developed it, in the light of your advice and other advice, these should be all the things on the wall we look at and say, right, what is relevant to the communications problem, the behaviour we're trying to change? You know, communication campaigns, you're trying to change people's behaviour for public good. So all the elements should be on here. There is then the OASIS point about we're going to put together a campaign with really tight objectives and audience insight. And then when we deliver that campaign to the public through you, I want to be able to demonstrate logos. There are facts behind this argument. I want to be able to demonstrate pathos in terms of the credibility of the argument and so on. So Aristotle is sort of the delivery mechanism. Okay, Government Communication Service of the UK. The only point I want to make here is we employ 3,000 communicators. We spend about £500 million a year, and the UK government does that because it believes that public service communications is a hugely important tool for delivering policies. But there is a government communications plan, a single government communications plan covering the 80 main campaigns that sit beneath the government's objective of building one nation that's characterised by security and stability. And the fact that the UK government can bring together that massive beast and has a plan and regularly evaluates that plan, my challenge to you is, in all your organisations, do you have a plan? Do you know what the campaigns are? Do you regularly monitor the impact? The biggest campaign we run is the combined campaign to promote the UK overseas in trade, tourism and education, the GREAT campaign, which is an example about bringing government departments and working together. We do a lot of measurement, and we do measurement not just because we like to see whether we're successful. We work out through measurement where we are not successful. And we also use measurement, particularly the social listening dashboards I've provided. We've moved away from collecting press cuttings, and we now do dashboards, and we report on the dashboards. And we're listening to what people are saying online, and we're developing and changing the communications, and in some cases amending the policies based on what we hear and say. So this is using communications evaluation as a listening tool to make the policy better. So listening to the public is not just about sitting there and saying, public, what have you got to tell us? It's using the online debates and the debates you see on the radio and in the newspapers to do that. If you need any help with this, you're all welcome and encouraged to join the Government Communications Service of the UK. You can go on the website, you just have to press a button, you can join as an affiliate member, and we'll send you a newsletter with all the up-to-date material, information that we have. We assess our campaigns every month, as I say there, on a RAG basis, red, amber, green. Ebola, the Ebola campaign we ran is an example of this, in that we applied what I've told you, I hope, in the way I've described it. It was also a campaign to explain to people in the UK that there was no danger of them getting Ebola, and explain to people in the UK and overseas how we were trying to deal with the problem at source. And the one point I want to make on this campaign, apart from the fact that it employed the principles I've laid out, is that it's continual cross-government working. And perhaps one thing I can offer from the UK, which is not as evident in other countries, is that we just all work together all the time. Not all perfectly, but that cross-government coordination, departments working together and sharing ideas and having common objectives, being clear when we come together, we use the OASIS format, what do we want to achieve here, is one thing that enabled us to reassure the public and show what we were doing properly over there. I'm going to finish off with some trends very quickly. They're all in the presentation, but we've looked at with some independent private sector organisations about the latest trends in government campaigns. You know that it's all becoming about one conversation. Online and offline are essentially the barriers are falling. I've talked about stories and the importance of stories. Sometimes we say narrative. I think a story is a better way of describing it. Those of you who are authors will know that stories have 5 elements. A story has a plot, character, setting, conflict, and a resolution. And I think in our government communication, sometimes we can tell the facts, but we don't set out the conflict, the need to change, and how that will be resolved, and then telling that story over various formats. Relevance. Delivering communications at the right time in the right place. Social media particularly, and the newspapers as well, are so crowded. Thinking about the timing of your intervention is absolutely key. At the heart of it is content that people will share. Has anyone heard of the band New Direction? The younger ones. There's no point talking to anyone about over 30, but the younger ones. So, New Direction are a band. A leading member of the band called Zayn Malik left the band, walked out and stuff. Our Department for Work, which runs our job centres, put out a tweet which said, "Don't worry, Zayn, you've left the band, but there are lots of jobs in the UK and you can find them at our job centres." Hugely shareable, emotional content from government, which was retweeted and shared. Really upset all the Zayn Malik fans who started bombarding and trolling the DWP. Most people got the point. There are jobs out there and we can get them. Shareable content. Digital influencers. Birmingham, the second city of the UK, I met a man who runs a website, 180,000 regular users. It's called Birmingham Updates. The Birmingham Evening Mail sells 27,000. So I've got a website run by one man, 180,000 users, and us helping him and providing him with content, video content particularly, where his videos can reach 30,000 people and influencing the influencers is hugely important. We've talked about emotional content, so I've just put a picture of a boy and an animal. I've no idea why I did that on there. And brand purpose. Remember, the brand is not the identity of something. The brand is the values and attributes that you associate with an organisation or an individual. And the brand challenge for most of our organisations is whether we walk the talk, whether our behaviour meets our desired brand values. And that's a challenge where communicators should act as the conscience of the organisation and tell people that unless they behave in a way that has integrity, they are honest and objective, and empathy, then they simply will not have the credibility to communicate. If you can't take in those 7 lessons, we've summarised them as 4. Think about Generation C, amplify what you do, content that's shareable, and emotional content. Finally, future of public service comms. I thought I'd put 2 stupid pictures of me up there. Everyone's interested again now. That's me, the top picture where I look like a minion. I have a beautiful wife and 2 horrible children. And my horrible boy said, "You look like a minion." is eyeball tracking technology, where we're looking at where we're testing adverts, because sometimes they don't always work, testing adverts, see where they go. The bottom one is virtual reality, where together with the UN, the government's Department for International Development, have done a VR film inside a Syrian refugee camp, which is one of the most moving pieces of communication content I've ever had the privilege to witness. But this is to illustrate the future, and the future is coming to all of us. And as previous speakers have said, this will be where we're going to go. We're going to publish on the 6th of November what we call the Modern Comms Operating Model, where we'll say any communications team should have 4 elements. It should have a strategy team to do the evaluation and insight, a combined media and campaigns team to deliver that, internal communications, and a direct public engagement team to talk directly to people as stakeholders, to influence them in all sorts of other ways, which I think is a radical change from the traditional model. If you found any of this useful, I'm very grateful. There are some books that you might like to read. For us, for the sort of UK government, the core text on campaigns is Alan Barnard's Campaign It, which I think is a wonderful book to explain with far more professionalism than I have about campaigns, and there are other stuff. That's what I hope you've got a bit of a grip on today. The GDS design principles are there because that's the government digital service of the UK, because we won't get this right first time, and iterating and focusing and starting with user need are crucially important. Finally, there's some quotes. I'd like you to use particularly the top one with the people you work for, the politicians, the director generals and so on. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Thank you for listening.